Hey, welcome. I'm excited about this video because I'm gonna do like a little series of me talking about my experiences with psychedelics. Um, I'm going to do sort of like trip reports, but I'm just gonna talk about kind of like my trips in each video of like an individual drug. So in this video I'm going to be talking about like my experiences with mushrooms, psilocybin, and I'm going to kind of tie in like what I've learned and experienced from all of my psilocybin trips. And I don't really have a whole lot in mind to talk about. I'm just going to like try and remember sort of my experience with my first trip and then just kind of let it flow into however it does, and I'm sure I'll remember more about my trips, and my trips will sort of start to like come together. But yeah, last week, about a week ago, maybe a little more than a week ago, I did my first ayahuasca trip. So that's the one that I'm kind of like leading up to, is all my sort of knowledge that I've acquired from psychedelics and experiences sort of leading up to this last really powerful ayahuasca ceremony, this ayahuasca trip that I was on. That'll kind of, I think, piece together where I'm at now with my views on life and just kind of where my mind is at and what the sort of things I question. So yeah, I'm just gonna try and now get right into talking about my experiences with psilocybin and sort of like the energy that I personally have felt from mushrooms. And I just started experimenting with psychedelics a little over a year ago. So I haven't done like tons and tons of trips, but I have had some pretty, quantifiably large trips, like high dose heroic type trips on a lot of substances. And so the first time I ever did psilocybin, I didn't have like a scale. I think I probably did somewhere around like 2.5 to 3 grams of psilocybin. I just ate it dry. And yeah, I just remember it being one of the most like insane experiences ever, because it was the first time I had taken a psychedelic other than like marijuana, which I had never experienced psychedelic levels, like level trips on marijuana until after I did mushrooms and realized that marijuana is actually a very powerful psychedelic. But yeah, just doing mushrooms for the first time, it hit me really strong, and it kind of showed me parts of myself and like things within my psyche that I just like didn't even think I was capable of. And kind of just like opened up all these different realities and ways of thinking. I don't really remember right now too much of like the come up. I think it was just feeling like really good and just like moving my body. And I don't think I had any music playing or anything. I think I was just, pretty much all my trips are in the dark in my room. And for this first trip, I didn't have any music playing. But yeah, I just remember that after a while, I was kind of like going in and out of reality. My mind started to race and I was kind of like all over the place. And in my trips with psychedelics, I'm like extremely somatic and moving my body a lot and really like, spazzing out a lot and things like that. So that was happening a lot, and like one of the movements that I do a lot, especially with mushrooms, is like I've had shoulder issues on my right side for a while, and so like one thing I'll do is just like swing my arm around a lot, and that happens a lot for me on psychedelics. Like it's just really, I don't know, releasing something there. And I remember the first time I was doing it, because I would like black out kind of, or not remember what's going on, and then I would like kind of regain consciousness, and then all of a sudden I'm like flailing my arm around, and I just remember like looking at it, like I couldn't even control my arm. It was just happening, and I was just laughing like, oh my god, this is hilarious. Like and just really feeling like it's a good thing. And I've often described mushrooms to myself after doing them as being like ruthlessly playful. like everything. And I know you can have like different experiences and bad trips and things like that, but I haven't experienced that on mushrooms yet. So for me, it's always been pretty pleasant. It's been like freaky and like insane, but like with this ruthless playfulness, and laughter. And I think a couple of the archetypes that typically come up for me whenever I'm on psychedelics is like the Joker and also like the infant baby. Those are very strong ones for me on psilocybin. So there were points where I would just like, kind of like with the arm flailing, I would just like go unconscious and like I'd be on one end of the room, and then like all of a sudden I'd regain consciousness and I'm like in a different position, like upside down on the other end of the room. Like, how did I get over here? And then at one point I just kind of did that, like regain consciousness, and I was laughing harder than I had ever laughed before. I didn't even know it was possible for me to laugh the way that I was laughing, just like snorting. And like I just imagined that the entire city could hear me laughing, because it was just insane. And it always reminds me of like the Joker from Batman. And if you've seen the actual movie The Joker, yeah, it's kind of like that. He just can't control his laughter, and it's so like it sounds insane. Like the actual laughter itself just sounds like maniacal or like psychotic. And so yeah, there's like almost this fear. I'm laughing and I can't control it, and I'm like just like at the top of my lungs uncontrollably. And there's like a fear that, oh my God, I feel so good and I'm laughing so hard that like other people could think that I am like psychotic. Like I could be put in a psych ward or go to jail or something because of how good I feel. And like it's not safe to express this. And I think that humor and laughter is something that I've suppressed in myself for a long time growing up. And something that tends to come to me is that, yeah, I don't know, like I don't really laugh like a genuine belly kind of laugh as much as I'd like to. And I'm also sometimes afraid to try and be funny. That's definitely something I've suppressed, is like trying to be funny, because I've just told myself growing up that I'm not a funny person, and when I try it seems to not succeed. So that's like something that I've been working through, and it comes up all the time with psychedelics. The other thing that comes up a lot with psilocybin for me is the like intense sexual energy, where at some point during the peaks of the trip, just everything is sexual for me, like literally everything. And my mind a lot of the time will go to like very violent, gruesome seeming things. Like I'll get images of like animals being slaughtered, or literally just like things like drilling like slowly straight through my brain with like blood just like going everywhere. And it will like turn me on sexually. Like I'll have, yeah, an erection, and literally in a lot of these images where I'm like dying or freaky things are happening, or it's just like very like sadistic, or yeah, things like that. It will like, my mind will show me these things and like get me to the point where I feel like I'm ejaculating. And it's just like this incredible thing to realize that like the energy of life and death and of sex, they're all basically the same energy. It's all one energy. And yeah, somehow with duality, we've like judged the very gruesome aspects of life to be, yeah, like something that you should not play with, and things that you there's things that you shouldn't be turned on by. And I think for me, psychedelics, especially mushrooms, just kind of like dissolve every barrier around that idea, and just everything, no matter like how terrible it seems, becomes sexually exciting, and like humorous. And yeah, I just like on a lot of my strong psilocybin trips, like I don't ever actually ejaculate, but at the end of the trip I'm like, how did I not ejaculate even once that trip? I swear it felt like I ejaculated 10 times. And it's really powerful and it's really strong, and sometimes like that's where you hit these points with psychedelics where it's like it feels so good that it's almost scary because of our conditioning, and it's like our mind, our ego is so like afraid of like merging into oneness, to the point where gruesome death can be experienced as like sexual orgasm. And you know, that's kind of, to me, like the reality of life. Like that's basically what's happening with life. Life and death are essentially the same thing, and both happening at the same time, and it's like intertwined with just like orgasmic sexual energy. And everything is basically like, life is basically God's infinite orgasm, is one way to think about it. And anything can turn us on if we let it. But yeah, there's definitely parts during the trip where like my ego's freaking out because I'm thinking of like very gruesome thoughts. It's like, oh God, please, I don't want to like, I don't want to ejaculate to this. This is too much. This is too much. Like, I should not be feeling good about this or something. And yeah, realizing how much we feel like we shouldn't feel good about, or we feel guilty or shameful for feeling good about certain things, because and it's especially true in like, you know, light working, positive kind of like just imbalanced positive communities, where it's almost like toxic positivity, you know, spiritual bypassing, and these people take on the role of like some authoritarian, like dictator style, as if everyone has to fall in line with their version of positivity and what they think is good. And so you can literally be shamed and guilted into feeling pleasure from certain things. And yeah, I think that the shame and the guilt from that is honestly what does cause some real imbalance, where if we could just express safely and comfortably the things that really bring us pleasure, then I think genuinely we would make very like loving, peaceful choices, and you know, not be so much in our shadow. But I think because we get shamed and guilted into feeling pleasure sometimes, then we have to do like secretive things. It like creates the shadow, and then we feel rejected, and we feel like we can't be loved for who we are at the deepest level. And it creates a lot of distortion, I think, in society and in individuals. And I think that that's a big reason why there is so much, you know, I don't know, distortion in the world, and things that are seemingly like messed up and imbalanced, is because a lot of it is being created by toxic positivity, where people are calling themselves light workers, but literally like shaming everything that isn't agreeable to them, and calling it wrong, which I don't think is really helping much at all. So yeah, also this is not just a simple trip report of my trips. It's also meant to be kind of my thoughts and opinions on life, as well as I'm explaining different parts of my trips. And so that's kind of like the Joker archetype energy that I often feel. And then there's sort of like the infant baby, or like very young toddler, which basically just feels like it wants to be held and taken care of, and just wants to like play And I feel like psychedelics do a really good job of, yeah, making me feel sort of taken care of, or like I'm just being cradled by life, and they're just like dangling little toys and spinny little lights and objects, and I can just kind of relax and be like, yay. In one of my recent trips, I was telling my friend who kind of facilitated the trip that, like, yeah, I really pretty much only feel 100% held and taken care of by psychedelics. It's like, yeah, some psychedelic experiences just kind of go beyond like what anyone else can really provide, because it's basically me and my own psyche that's starting to unify and take care of itself, and it's just like the most wholesome thing that I can imagine. And so another common thing for me with psychedelics, and especially psilocybin, is kind of going through like the evolution of becoming, or like kind of going through the stages of infancy, and like returning back to what it's like to be this infant that just experiences things very differently. For me, there's always this desire to like experience the world with my mouth. I remember my first trip on mushrooms. I just remember having this thought, like I was like sucking on my fingers, and I was just like putting random things in my mouth, and it was just felt so pleasurable to just be feeling things with my mouth. It was like all other sensory perception pretty much didn't exist that much. It was like I could only really experience the world clearly with my tongue and my teeth and my gums. And so I just had this thought like, oh, I freaking understand babies now. Like literally, this is how they experience the world. They just have to put everything in their mouth in order to like understand things. And so that's usually how I am on psilocybin. And I was just like being really playful, and like everything was so sexual as well at the same time, and like everything was just turning me on, and I was just like licking every like part of me, and just like I had a mask, you know, like a face for sleeping, an eye mask at one point, and sometimes I put the eye mask on when I'm doing psilocybin to try and like go deeper into it, but I get so somatic in my trips and like so crazy all over the place. I'm just everywhere, and I get so playful on psilocybin that it never stays on, and I'm just like so like I'll take it off and just like spin it around. And I remember like at one point just stuffing the whole eye mask in my mouth, like, oh, this is so good. And then I had like a chair, and with the leg, you know, kind of sitting next to me. I just like went over to the chair, and I was like stroking the leg and thinking like, oh my God, like I just wanted to like have sex with this this like leg of the chair. And I just like put it in my mouth, just like completely was like licking up and down the leg of this chair, feeling like I wanted to ejaculate basically. And yeah, it's just fun to experience like that. Our psyche can basically get to the level of orgasm and sexual turn on literally from anything. Like we don't need I don't know, another human being in order to feel like extreme sexual turn on and like orgasmic pleasure. And we don't need to be doing anything necessarily even sexual. We don't have to be touching ourselves or doing anything with our genitals. And I also remember looking into the mirror at one point. There was a point where I started looping through like probably 4 different emotions. It was like extreme happiness, and then extreme depression, and then I don't know what the other ones were, maybe like anger, and there was one more, but I just kept like every 5 to 10 seconds. It was just like a wave. It was really interesting. I don't know how long it lasted, but I just kept looping through these 4 emotions, and like every 5 or 10 seconds I'd go into the next one and then the next one. And so I'd feel like immense depression, like my life is over and I'm so sad. And then like 5 seconds later, I would feel immensely happy to be alive and just so joyful. And then the next moment, I'd feel like incredible anger or something like that. And it was interesting because I was like feeling it so deeply, but I was also noticing that I was looping and that like it just wasn't gonna stop. And so even though I was feeling like really depressed, which was probably the worst one for me, it was like the cycle where for a few seconds I would just feel extremely depressed. Because at one part of it was like, oh, I feel like I'm just gonna be this way forever. But there was also a knowing that in like 5 seconds I was gonna be extremely happy. So that was really interesting to go through, that sort of looping emotions. And I'm gonna talk a lot more about looping in my next video, where I'll talk about my experiences with LSD. And I remember kind of while that looping was happening around that time, I looked into a mirror, and I remember kind of being like a little disgusted with myself, or like I just had all these mean thoughts, like you're just a fucking ape, like you're just an ugly little stupid ape. And I was like doing weird things with my mouth, like sticking my tongue out and like and just like looking at myself be ridiculous in the mirror and just saying like really mean things to me. But that was a big thing, was like, you're just a fucking dumb ugly ape. That was the essence of how I thought about myself looking in the mirror. But at the same time, there wasn't, I don't know, there was still kind of like this peacefulness. It was like there was a part of me that was disgusted with myself, but then a part of me that felt a little more eternal. That was just like, oh well, I can live with that. I can live with being a stupid, ugly ape, and like at the same time knowing that like I'm more than that as well. So those are the major things that I experienced on psilocybin. That mostly came from my first trip, and I did another trip soon after that. That was about 7 grams. And honestly, that was, it didn't feel that much heavier than the first one of about 2.5 or 3 grams that I was just talking about. They felt like very similar experiences, other than I'd say there was more like visual, crazy stimulation. Like it was hard to open my eyes on 7 grams because everything was just moving too much. And I find that it's very hard for me to open my eyes on a lot of psychedelics. I hear from some people that sometimes it's hard for them to close their eyes. But for me, I just get so sensitive to opening my eyes on psychedelics. Sometimes it feels almost impossible for me to try and open my eyes while I'm tripping. And on like sort of lower doses of psilocybin, it's just really pleasant. And I feel just like really dancy, happy to be alive, and I feel like my motor function, like my brain is just way more creative and working better, and like I'm more in a flow state. So if I'm beatboxing or something like that, then I'll just easily make really nice beats and everything will flow, and sometimes like sounds that I have a hard time making when I'm not on drugs, basically. Like I can easily make, it's like my lips and my body just know how to make the noises that I want to make now, where I don't really know how to do it so well otherwise. And my last psilocybin trip that I did, it was my biggest one. It was about 11.5 grams, and I did a method called lemon tech. So you like blend it up, or you grind it up into I've got like a coffee grinder, my family does, so use the coffee grinder to blend up the mushrooms, and then you let it soak in lemon for a while, which kind of like extracts the compounds and then you drink that, and it's supposed to, you know, be a little bit more effective. So it was a really strong trip, and I honestly don't even remember that much of the trip other than just laughing hysterically like I normally do, and just feeling, it was one of the most incredible experiences of my life. Just everything was hilarious, and like I could just see the cosmic joke of life, and you know, the infiniteness and sort of the joy. It was a really good trip, really powerful. And then coming down from that, the afterglow was like the greatest thing I've ever experienced. I felt more alive than I probably had ever felt before, like just feeling everything. I rode my bike to the store to go get some fruit, and it was like the greatest thing I had ever experienced, that bike ride to the store. Yeah, everything just felt perfect. And a lot of the time I'll like mumble in sort of like the infant, not necessarily infant, but like very young, sort of like baby state, and just like childish words, and I'll just like in a really playful way where, you know, I'm just kind of like la la la, I have to pee pee, I have to use the pee pee, and just like mumbling things like that, where I just want to talk like a child. But yeah, the 11.5 gram trip was really profound, because it was kind of basically everything that I was talking about up until now, but even more intensified, and like on an even crazier level, where like all the gruesomeness and all the war, and all like the worst, darkest aspects of life just become ecstatic and hilarious and like sexual. And then oftentimes on the come down, I just want to like have this strong desire to just like share all the thoughts in my head with like everybody on the planet. So I often write a lot on Facebook, and I remember on the last one, the 11.5 gram trip, I was just like blasting out Facebook posts of things I just thought were hilarious and concepts that felt so true to me. And so I'm just gonna like read a few things that I wrote when I did that trip. And so one of the things was that I had this thought that heaven and earth, the post that I wrote says, "Heaven and earth long for each other. It's a forbidden love, and I am the secret messenger between them." And I had this experience being on psilocybin where it was like, there's kind of the infinite cosmic dance between polarity, heaven and earth, dark and light, good and evil, and like they really want to just like be lovers. And so like heaven and earth are just really longing to be with each other and touch each other, but they can't. It's this forbidden love. And when we do psychedelics, or at least this is how I felt in my trip this time, was like when I do psychedelics, I basically become like this portal, this gateway that opens up, and it lets them like come together and merge themselves through me, and they can like cuddle and be together while I'm tripping. Which was a really beautiful thought and a beautiful thing to experience. And that like I'm basically just a vessel or a bridge, so that way heaven and earth can communicate with each other. And yeah, I can be like their secret little messenger. And some of these posts are just funny. Like I was just laughing the whole time trying to write all these, and I have a bunch of posts, but I'm just gonna read two more that I really enjoy. And actually they're not even public on my account. Like I published them publicly on my Facebook, and then I was like, okay, these are actually like, I think probably too much for me to really share with just like everyone. Because I just saw how like psychotic I probably could look to a lot of people, which now I don't think I really care that much about looking psychotic. Okay, the first one says, my daily life is just me winding myself up with pressure and stress so that I can experience an infinite amount of bliss watching myself dance and dangle in front of my eyes like a child's toy that I can play with and laugh uncontrollably at when I do drugs. This is basically the purpose of life. If you're not into drugs this lifetime, just give yourself a couple more. It's even better when you let yourself stew in your own stress and misery for a couple lifetimes. The ecstasy of the unwinding pop is immensely more pleasurable and worth it. Time to wind it back up again. So yeah, that's something that I often, in almost all my trips with almost any psychedelic, I just have this thought that like, okay, at least 50% of the purpose of life is to do drugs. Every time I'm like, this is like why we're alive. We're alive so that way we can do psychedelics and experience all this amazing stuff. And then the next post says, I don't know if any of you are ready for this, but you'll really only experience complete and utter ecstasy, or complete and utter ecstatic holy union when going to war with the world and blowing your own brains out has you blushing red and at the edge of coming in your pants. So that's kind of what I experience a lot on especially psilocybin, is that life is so infinite, and yeah, any biases that we have or any direction like that we lean on the spectrum of positivity and negativity, and all our opinions about what's good and bad, like, don't really affect the fact that God is like basically unconditional and unbiased and can basically get off to anything. And that's actually like probably the greatest pleasure that you could ever experience, is like this whole merging which comes when basically the most gruesome, horrifying, terrifying things in the world can actually like put a smile on your face and make you feel like intense sexual energy. And like once you hit the point where you can literally like get an erection and orgasm from the idea of blowing your own brains out and committing suicide, that's when you will feel like the greatest ecstasy you've ever felt in your life. So yeah, these are some pretty radical ideas, and the more that I go into my other trips and my experiences with other different psychedelics, the ideas are probably going to become even more and more radical. And I think that this is a really good transition for me to start really talking about some of the things that I contemplate and how I view life, because psychedelics for the past year have played a huge role in like influencing my ideas about life and infinity and God and all the big questions, what we are. And I feel like I haven't really talked about those things in quite a while. So I think the shift in my perspective now to how I used to talk about life before is a bit different, and it's probably going to be pretty radical for a lot of people. So anyways, that's the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope that it was entertaining enough for you to make it to the end here. I'm gonna be making more like this, and let me know in the comments if you like this content, and also let me know if you have any opinions on psychedelics, or if you have like your own trips, if you resonate with any of this. Yeah, I'd really love to hear your thoughts and opinions on it, and I love hearing from other people who have had crazy trips and realized different things about them, especially when it's like very similar to things that I've realized. So I'll talk with you in the next video.